So,
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar on improving hair technique. I'm Matt Harvey, the Chief Officer of Community Pharmacy Liverpool. We have Kate O'Hagan, who is a specialist childhood asthma nurse from Alder Hey, Alison Scowcroft from CHL, Kim Williams and Romy Eden from the Beyond programme, and also David Barker, my engagement officer here in Liverpool. I'm going to hand you over to Alison, who's going to take you through the slides of this evening's presentation.
Thanks very much, Matt. So we're using Zoom this evening, and just a quick note to say that all attendees should be automatically muted. We do have lots of time for questions at the end, so if you do have any questions, please make a note of them and ask them at the end, or you can pop them in the Q&A session, and if we can answer them during the session, we will do. We'll definitely have lots of time for questions at the end. Just to cover the agenda, I will hand over to Kim in a second, and she'll give you a little bit of an overview and a background to the Beyond Children and Young People programme hosted by Alder Hey. Then we'll hand over to Kate, who will give you some good practice tips on supporting children with their inhalers. Then I'll do a little bit of an overview of the inhaler technique service, how the team can support, something around the asthma control test, and some resources, and Matt will do a quick overview for you of the farm outcomes modules. Then he'll hand back to me, and we'll do a little bit around barriers and challenges to delivering the service and some top tips for successful service delivery. And then, as I said, a chance for questions at the end. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you should understand your training requirements, what preparation you need to do before you start to recruit patients, how to deliver a consultation with a child and their guardian as appropriate, the ACT score and the inject device if appropriate, how to become familiar with demonstrating correct inhaler technique, and how to tailor your consultation and inhaler technique, particularly for children, and advice on how to deliver the service in your pharmacy. So I'll just hand over to Kim now to give you a little bit of background around the programme. Over to you, Kim.
Okay, thanks, Alison. My name's Kim Williams. I'm the lead nurse for the Cheshire and Merseyside Children and Young People Network. And as part of that, I'm also the clinical lead for the respiratory and asthma workstream. One of our main deliverables is around delivering the asthma care bundle. And a key part of that is ensuring that children are using their inhalers correctly. So inhaler technique is really, really key to us being able to deliver this. What we wanted to do was look at using expertise across the spectrum of people that actually have contact with children and young people and their families with this. And so we're really keen and pleased to have your support around delivering this. So you are trained professionals who have contact significantly with these families, and it's great to think that you would want to be part of this to actually make sure that children are using their inhalers properly, because we know that this makes a big difference. If they're not using them properly, they don't get the right amount of their medication that they're going to get, but also if they are overusing, so we know that a high reliance on SABAs is going to be detrimental and they need a referral onwards. So all of this is going to be really key to us being able to achieve our outcomes. So I'm really, really pleased that you're all involved. That's just where we're coming from. That's why this project has been proposed. So I'll hand back to Alison to crack on with the main bulk of this.
Thanks, Kim. Really, really useful and interesting to have that context of where this service has come from. Just moving on with the slides, we do have some quiz questions throughout the webinar today. This is just to check that everybody's still awake, that we've not bored you silly with the content. I'm hoping that the technology works, given we've had a few technical issues at the beginning of the session today. I've got my fingers crossed that this works okay. So hopefully at the point in the presentation when there is a quiz question, you'll see the blue question mark on the screen, and a Zoom poll should come up with a question with multiple choice answers, and we're looking for you to give us the answers that you think, just to check your understanding and make sure that we're all on the same page with regards to asthma. So hopefully the quiz questions work. If they don't, we might just have to skip over that bit, but I'm hopeful that the technology will help us. So we are going to start now with our first quiz question, and it's starting on a little bit of a sad note, this one, but I think this really puts into perspective the reason why it's so important for us as community pharmacists to tackle this issue of inhaler technique when we know that asthma is such a serious disease. So the first question is, in 2017, how many people died from asthma in the UK? So I can't see that a quiz has appeared. I don't know if any, oh, there we go, look at that, beautiful. So you should have a little pop-up that's appeared on your screen. In 2017, how many people died from asthma in the UK? And you've got 5 choices: 56, 203, 787, 1,484, and 2004. I don't know, Matt, if you can see if any responses are coming in as yet to that question.
They are, yeah. 16 out of 23 have answered. Don't be shy, come on. The quicker you answer them, the quicker we can go home. Or actually downstairs or wherever you are in your home, probably, rather than going home. Come on, 2 people left. Oh, we've got 2 shy ones, so I'm going to end it there. So I don't know if you can see who scored what, but 1 person thought it was 56, 4 people thought it was 203, no one thought it was 787, 9 thought it 1,484, and 7 thought it was 2004. There you go,
perfect. We can see the results on screen there now. So the majority were correct. It was 1,484 people, which for me in 2017 is quite a startling number of people dying from a condition which is truly reversible. So with that note, I'm going to hand over to Kate, who's going to talk to you about paediatric inhaler technique. Over to you, Kate.
Hello everybody, my name's Kate. I'm one of the advanced paediatric nurse practitioners in general paediatrics at Alder-Hey. So quite a high proportion of our patients are coming in requiring inhalers on their admission, and every single one of our patients who we prescribe inhalers to, all will be given a large volume spacer. Am I able to move my own slides along? Or? Thank you. So the most common inhalers that we use are the pressure meter dose inhalers, and we talk about them in loose terms with families as the reliever, which is your blue inhaler, which is your salbutamol, and then the most predominant preventer that we use is clenomodulite or beclomethasone. But we tend to call them colours because we find that our families prefer us to talk about the blue and the brown, and we talk about reliever and preventer just so we don't get tripped up with the names of the drugs. A lot of our families find that confusing, and our young people as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So only recently in Alder-Hey, we actually started using the aero chambers. Predominantly for many, many years, we've used the volumatic only. However, in the last few months, we've had a supply issue with the soft silicone mask with the volumatic. So at the moment, we've moved to the aero chamber devices for our patients under the age of 3 years. Our patients over the age of 3 years, we're still using the large volumatic spacer without the mask, but we quite often get children coming in from the community using the aero chambers. Our respiratory physicians here at Alder-Hey prefer the volumatic, but any spacer is better than no spacer. So if they prefer to use the aero chamber, then that's also absolutely fine by us. The aero chamber has got 4 different devices, so you can see, and the small, medium, large, and then with the mouthpiece also. And the volumatic has the one size, however, one comes with and without the mask. That's all that's different. So in the large volumatic space, it'll say pediatric at the top of the box, and that basically means it's got that soft silicone mask in. However, once that child is able to use the mouthpiece only, they can just discard the mask. The spacer works exactly the same. Thank you. So all the aero chambers, I quite like the aero chambers. I've not used them before until recently. However, every time you get one out of its box, it comes with this information leaflet on describing how to put it together and essentially administer. And the pictures are very child friendly, and it reads quite easily. But essentially, there's no assembly with the aero chamber. It comes as you see it, and all you need to do is stick your inhaler into the back of it. The it's made out of rubber, so you could actually, the pressure meter dose inhalers kind of have an oval shaped mouthpiece. However, you can stick round inhaler pieces also in the back if that's what that patient's been prescribed. So as with all inhalers, the first thing we suggest you do is give the inhaler a good shake, and we usually ask the children to participate in that. That's something they really enjoy doing. So giving the inhaler a really good shake and then pop it into the back of the spacer. Obviously removing the cap. And then if you haven't used the inhaler for a while, we do say to parents sometimes prime it if it's been rattling around the bottom of a handbag, perhaps with the cap off, just give it a prime, make sure it's still working, check it's still in date, and then also feel the aerosol to make sure you know that it's not just the propellant that you're administering. Once you've put the inhaler into the back of the spacer, you can gently put the face mask over the nose and the mouth of the child. You don't need to press it hard. You can do it over the top of their dummies if they have one. And then you activate the inhaler. It's very difficult to coordinate the breaths with the young children. Ideally, you'd activate the inhaler at the start of inspiration, but the little ones, you just kind of have to go with it because they're a little bit unpredictable and more difficult to coordinate. And there is a flow view. You can see at the top right of the slide, it has like a small silicone flap that flaps up and down with each breath. So you need to keep that over the child's nose and mouth for about 5 to 6 breaths, and then you can take it away. And then again, take the inhaler out, give it to the child, get them to give it a good shake, and then do the whole process over again. We always say to parents when we're giving 5 puffs of the inhaler, it should take about 5 minutes to give it. It can be quite lengthy, so don't worry, you can't rush it, you can't give more than 1 puff at a time. And ideally in between activating the inhaler, so in between each puff, you need to wait about 30 seconds for the drug to kind of refill with inside the metered dose inhaler. So that's it for the aero chamber with the mask. And then this is the instructions for without the mask. It's very similar. If these ones have a whistle on them, so if you're breathing too quick or too fast, it'll whistle to tell you to sort of slow down. After each puff, they asks if the patient's able to coordinate to hold their breath for 5 to 10 seconds, and then again to do this for 2 to 3 times for each puff, and then repeat over again. The aero chambers can be dismantled. So the colour bit at the end, so on this picture here, you can see it's blue. You can remove that rubber, and also you can twist and remove the mouthpiece at the top. And you can either wash these in mild soapy water and leave to drip dry, or you can pop them in the top rack of a dishwasher with no detergent though. So I think it's probably just easier just to advise parents to pop them in the washing up bowl, and then not to dry with a cloth because that creates static within the device itself and affects the delivery of the medication. So just leave those to drip dry overnight on the draining board. So that's it with the aero chamber. The next one is the large volumatic, which is the one we use the most. This we created a couple of videos a couple of years back. So if we're all right to just play those, this first one here is with Layla, who's using it with the mask. So there's no sound, but what I can do is I can talk you over. So
try again, sorry.
That's Sabio Small inhalers today. In order to give this must be given through a spacer device to make sure that most of the medication gets to the lungs, okay? In order to do this, you must clip the spacers together like this, and there is a mask that fits on the end. You must always give the inhaler a good shake to mix the medication with the propellant and take off the cap. The inhaler goes into the ends of the spacer. This mask's going to go over her nose and mouth gently and must be tilted to 45 degrees so the little valve drops open. Okay, so we'll demonstrate that now. Is that okay? Yeah. So we're going to pop this over the nose and mouth, and we give 1 squirt in, and we leave that there for about 20 seconds. It might be appropriate to sing Versa Wheels on the Bus, or to make it a bit fun and give her a hand puppet or something. Please don't hold her down if she does not like this. Once the 20 seconds has passed of normal breathing, we would take it away, take the inhaler out again and wait for a further 10 seconds for that to refill. Once you've done that, we would shake this and repeat the process. Oh, good. Yeah. She's so good. You're looking better.
Okay, so that's using it with the mask. I think the key things when you're using it with the mask is, I don't think you can see my camera. I'm holding a spacer, which is no good for you, but behind the mouthpiece, if you give it a little shake, I don't know if you can hear, there's a little rattle, and that's a valve. Now, each breath volume in a young infant, less than 3 years of age, they don't have the tidal volume, which is kind of like the breath volume to move that valve. So to kind of override that, you need to make sure that the volumetic's tilted at that 45-degree angle, because that tips the valve forward and allows that the medication to move in passively, opposed to the child actually moving the valve themselves. If you go to the next slide, it will show you how to use it without the mask. And this is Orla. This is my little Orla, who's actually not little anymore, on the next slide along, because these were filmed a couple of years ago.
Okay, hello. My name's Vicky and I'm one of the nurses. And you've been prescribed an inhaler today, so I need to teach you how to use that. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So this is a spacer device. It's very important that we use this device so the medication gets into your lungs, which are here. Is that okay? So how do we fit it together? So we line that up and squeeze it together like that. Now, what do you think we might do with this inhaler? Do we shake it? Would you give it a good shake for me? Yeah. Oh, that's a very good shake. Well done. And then we're going to remove the cap. And this fits in here. So this piece of the inhaler needs to go in your mouth. Make sure that you don't put your tongue up the end of it. And make sure that your lips are closed nice and round it. And then I'm going to ask you to do 5 good breaths in and out. Do you think you can do that? Very good. So open your mouth and we're going to squirt it in and then do 5 breaths. So can we count? So big breath. 1 and again. 2 again. 3 again. 4 again. 5. Well done. High fives. So then we're going to take this out. We're going to wait a further 10 to 15 seconds to let the medication refill. So we take it out. Then we're going to reshake it, pop it in, and then we're going to do another 5. Is that okay? So in your mouth. So squirt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well done. High five. In order to wash the spacer, it needs to be washed once a month in warm soapy water. Don't rinse the soap suds out, just leave them in and leave it to drip dry on the draining board. Never dry it out, because if you dry it out, it causes static. The medication just goes in and sticks to the sides. If you come to it the next day and there's any water in it, just dab it with some kitchen roll.
Thank you. So that's using it without the mask. And then the information that I've got on the left-hand side of the screen, that's just kind of a screen grab of the information that we give to parents at discharge. So ideally, every patient should have not only their personalised wheezy or asthma action plan, they'll be given inhaler advice information leaflet, depending on which device that we've given them at discharge. And we also should do an inhaler check every admission, which is something that we're working on in Alder Hey to make sure that every child receives that. And then my final slide, I've just put some quick QR codes. If you wanted to have a little look back at those videos, you're more than welcome to, with the with and the without the mask. And then the Aero Chamber website is really useful, and that you can print off the information leaflets on there. And then they also have their own videos demonstrating the use of those also. And Asthma UK, they have, if you contact them, you can't contact them as a healthcare professional, you need to advise the parents to, but they send out like a reward chart pack to the home address, which has got stickers and a reward chart for the children to take the medication. So those are the little top tips that I'd give you from a paediatric perspective.
Thanks very much, Kate. Really, really useful, informative, and the videos were great. I'm just going to hand over to Kim for a second before we move on to the next section, if that's okay. Over to you, Kim.
Hi, thanks, Alison, and thanks, Kate, for that. That's absolutely brilliant. I just want to just say to everybody that's there that we are really aware that all the videos that we show, anywhere that you find them, Ask Me UK or whatever, we've always got a really, really compliant child. Now, remembering that sometimes you're talking about children under the age of 5, definitely, and often when they're quite distressed with their breathing, it can be quite difficult to administer this. So there's a little bit about helping the parents to understand that sometimes it's not an easy thing to do, so they're not failing, because what happens is they try and give it and then they feel like they're failing completely and then they end up in A&E. So I think it's just like, you know, there's lots of things about, you know, some people will tell you, and Kate will probably back me up on this, that their parents work out a way of doing it, which might be, you know, singing Wheels on the Bus, or doing something, you know, they sing a song during the time it takes or something like that to make it feel like a familiar thing. And I think Kate did mention that practicing this when they're not in a distressed state is a really good thing to do. So I just thought I'd like throw that one in, because that's what always gets me when we show pictures. The children are always beautiful and perfectly compliant, and that isn't the real case a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I quite often end up giving a practice inhaler to the parents first, using the spacer, teddy bears, dolls.
Yeah.
And sometimes children are better if we don't get involved and we stand back and talk the parents through it. Or sometimes some children are better if we take over and, you know, say, this is what's happening. I think you just kind of get that with experience and kind of judge. But ultimately, the parent needs to do it when they get home. So you need them to be a partner in the care quite early on.
Kate,
Great, yeah.
You should be able to remove your, we'll switch on your camera now. I don't know if you wanted to show again the valve bit on the volumatic.
Sure.
I managed to wangle it so your panelists.
Oh yeah, sorry, it did just kick me out because I accepted the.
That's good. So yeah, we can all see you now. So
I'm in Andy's bedroom in Toy Story. So this is the volumatic. They've also, what you can see here, they've got these pins, so you have to line the pins up. I mean, once you've got one in your hand, it's quite self-explanatory. So you line those up. So in here, there's like a circular valve, and if you can hear it shaking. So when the child's put their mouth around there, as they're of an older age, they've got the bigger breath volume, to move that valve back and forwards. However, when you have the mask on, there's more dead space, there's more wasted space here and less breath volume for each child. So in order to help them out, you just need to tilt that forward. And once you tilt that forward, the gravity just drops that valve down, and it'll passively flow to the child. So if you're giving it like this, you've quite possibly got the valve closed and it's not going to be any good at all.
Brilliant.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've got a quick question. I don't know if anyone else has got any questions, but we often get asked what to do by parents when kids are asleep. So especially if they're really, really unwell and you have to give kind of the inhaler kind of multiple times a day, or they're really bad at night, which of course asthmatics possibly can be. How would you go about doing this if a child's, say, asleep? Would you try and wake them up and arouse them, or is it okay just if they're still asleep and still breathing, just to put the mask over their face and just puff it?
It's a bit of a judgment call. So if you think your child's going to absolutely freak out if they woke up with a mask over their face, then I think you should probably wake them up. Like I've got a child who sleeps like the dead, so he wouldn't notice. So I think you probably know your child best. If they've been having it, you can only really do it with the mask anyway. So it'll be a child under the age of 3 that you can give while they're asleep, because the mask you can just pop over, especially if they've got their dummy. And so to be honest, quite often we creep in and do it in hospital when they're asleep. If you know when you're going in to do a set of observations on the child and they wake up when you're putting a SATS probe on their toe, you know that you're going to need the parents' help and kind of have to wake them up. So yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a judgment call on how what your child's like, and if you're going to frighten them, really.
Okay, but it's okay to do though, because we get asked quite a bit.
It's just making sure you kind of get in that angle, but you should be able to. Child's up on the pillow, you should be able to get that angle. We do it quite a lot, but then we do get some children like bit freaked out when we're doing it. So yeah, so just be careful of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, note to everyone that if you try without the mask, the child does wake up because trying to get the thing within their teeth and stuff.
Yeah,
doesn't really work. They
you
will
can't
wake
do
up
it.
doing that.
No.
I tried it a few times, never worked any time. I tried it, so they will wake up.
Yeah. But you can time it. So I always say to parents, kind of time it. So if you kind of given, so say if they're having an acute episode and yet they're having 4-hourly inhalers, you're going to be keeping a really close eye on them anyway. So if you are doing that, I say do one around about 11 o'clock when you go to bed, then you have to do one about 3 when you in the middle of the night. So you have to do 1 in the middle of the night, and then they're up by 7 anyway. So you can kind of titrate the times like that. Also, I didn't mention is with the steroid inhaler, so the preventers, because they're steroidal, I always say to parents, do it prior to brushing their teeth, and then you reduce the risk of them getting oral thrush as well, because they've then washed their mouth out afterwards, because you usually say rinse your mouth out after having the low dose steroids. So and then that kind of sets it in their routine as well, and hopefully promotes toothbrushing also.
Brilliant,
I don't know.
thank you.
I know Kate, you'd said that you perhaps weren't able to stay with us till the end of the session. So I don't know if there's any other questions that anybody wants to ask of Kate before we move on to the rest of the session.
It's okay. I can stick around till 8. So
Can you?
yeah, I'm interested
If
to
anyone
hear.
does, then feel free to just put your hand up and I will shout your name out and I'll click the your name so you can speak, because currently you're all muted, all of the people who are attending. So only the panelists can speak. So like I said, by all means, please put your hand up. I'll shout you out and give you permission to talk.
Fabulous, thank you.
Currently, no one is putting their hands up, so I assume there's no questions at this point.
I shall carry on then, but if we do have a question, feel free to interrupt me, Matt.
Will do. I'll keep my eye out.
Thank you. I'll try and share screen again. Okay, so moving into a bit of an overview of the inhaler technique service. So one of the first things that you need to do within your pharmacy is make sure that you've got some placebo devices. It's absolutely critical if you're going to demonstrate proper technique to your patients, and it is your responsibility as the pharmacy to source these placebo devices and to be able to effectively use them. As Kate said, there's lots of videos online that you can use. We've got some resources further on to link you to some of those videos, but it's absolutely essential that you as a pharmacist or technician delivering this service can appropriately demonstrate inhaler technique. So the key message here is practice, practice, practice. Do it in front of the mirror, do it in front of your family, train your own children on how to use devices, even if they're not asthmatic and they don't use inhalers, because the more comfortable and confident you are with demonstrating inhaler technique, the better you will be at demonstrating it to your patients. There is a website available for you as to how you can contact manufacturers to get placebo devices. All of the inhaler manufacturers are very happy to supply devices to community pharmacies free of charge, because they recognise that this is a really important job that we're doing. So please access that spreadsheet and make sure that you've got some devices ordered in and ready for when you start delivering this service. And do remember infection control and good hygiene when it comes to these placebos. You probably need a set of devices for each person within your pharmacy who's going to be demonstrating inhaler technique. Just a very quick note on the InCheck device. It's probably less suitable for younger children, but it is certainly a tool that is useful for older children who may be prescribed different types of devices other than the MDI used via a spacer. So the InCheck is a device that's used to measure a patient's inspiratory flow, and the higher the inspiratory flow, the more puff that they need to activate that inhaler. You can see the dial on the right hand side here, which shows some of the devices that need more inspiratory flow and some that need less. So it would be useful for you to have an InCheck device. I think they're about maybe 10-12 quid. They're not particularly expensive. You can order one from your wholesaler. Again, it's handy for you to have one just in case you've got some older children, perhaps teenagers, who might be prescribed some of the different types of devices. And if they are struggling with their inhaler technique, then checking their inspiratory flow is appropriate for that device would be really helpful. It also helps them to understand if they're using a device which needs a lower inspiratory flow, such as an MDI, helps them to kind of slow down their breathing. So the dial on the top shows you what the inspiratory flow is, and you need to match that up to the device that the patient has got. So I really recommend ordering an InCheck device if possible. We have another question now, so hopefully Zoom is going to catch up with us and ask us a question. This is a bit of a green question. So as we know, I'm sure metered dose inhalers do have quite a high carbon footprint due to the aerosol gases that are used as a propellant. So the question is, 100 doses of an MDI have a carbon footprint which is roughly equal to a drive of how many miles? Hopefully we should see the quiz starting to appear in a second. We've got a few options again for you to choose what you think the answer might be. So 20 miles. Oh, it's gone away.
Hang on. Sorry. I was too excited and pressed end poll before I meant to. Can you see that now?
There we go. I can see it on my screen. Yeah. So 100 doses of an MDI have a carbon footprint roughly equal to a drive of how many miles? 20, 70, 120, 180 or 250 miles? What do you think? We got some answers coming in, Matt.
Yes, 17 out of 23 of, oh, hang on, 19 out of 23. We got to 21 last time, so let's see whether anybody else is going to answer. No. Okay, I'm going to end it there and share the results this time. So as you can see there, 3 people thought 20, 4 people thought 70, 8 people 120, 2 thought 180 and 2 thought 250.
Wow, so pretty spread across the board, but most people plumping for the one in the middle. The actual answer is 180 miles, which is the equivalent of driving around about from Liverpool to London. So probably quite a lot more than a lot of people thought, 180 miles. Really interesting information.
You've probably all seen as well a lot of local ICP places, formerly CCGs, switching people to Salamol inhalers as opposed to generic salbutamol or Ventolins. That's because Salamol has got a much reduced carbon footprint compared to a Ventolin, for example. So I think that's equivalent to about 2 miles for a Salamol compared to Liverpool to Newcastle, the bit that's always been mooted on green inhaler scheme things across Cheshire and Merseyside for a Ventolin.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a big issue. Inhalers do contribute to something like 3 or 4% of the NHS's total carbon footprint. So there is a big move to try and switch patients over to lower carbon footprint inhalers. There's a huge difference between MDIs and DPIs, as you can see on the screen there. In terms of the gases, the propellants, the hydrofluorocarbons that are used in a pressured MDI. So they are powerful greenhouse gases and contribute to global warming. DPIs do have a carbon footprint that's 18 times lower than MDIs. I think in the population of patients that we're talking about in your service, that those conversations perhaps are a little bit more tricky. Obviously, the key bit for a child is to make sure that they're taking their inhalers appropriately. And as Kate described earlier, the majority of inhalers that are prescribed are metered dose inhalers. But once you're talking about children who are a little bit older, perhaps secondary school age and teenagers, they may even be more aware themselves of the carbon footprint impacts of inhalers. Our teenagers are very well informed nowadays. So I think it's important that you're aware of and able to answer any questions that your older patients may have around the differences between MDIs and DPIs and that carbon footprint. DPIs are perfectly acceptable and valuable for treatment for asthma. So if a patient does have any concerns, then do urge them to speak to their GP about that.
I suppose if we're improving inhaler technique, therefore they're going to use less of the MDI because not going to have such bad asthma. So therefore we're all going to help reduce the carbon footprint anyway. So there we
Absolutely.
go.
Absolutely. Good point. Thanks, Matt. So moving on into an overview of the service. And first thing that you'll need to do once you're set up, you've got all your placebos in place, your team's all briefed, everybody's read the service spec and you know what it is you need to do. You've done your training, you need to recruit your patients. So please do involve your whole pharmacy team in recruiting patients. This is not a service that's just for the pharmacist or just for the technician to provide. The whole team can get involved. You're needing to recruit patients who are using inhalers who are age 16 and under. And I believe that the Beyond team are going to provide some posters to help you to recruit patients into the service. And also potentially those patients will be provided to GPs to help recruiting patients into the service for you. You're then going to do an initial consultation with the patient. The consultation can be delivered by pharmacists and registered technicians. And that initial consultation should be with the patient and with the patient or carer if they administer the inhaler. Obviously, if you've got older teenagers, then you'll need to use your judgment as to whether they need a parent or carer in that consultation with them or not. You're going to do the asthma control test, the ACT, as part of your consultation. That's really important as it gives you a good indication as to what the patient's asthma control is like. Use the InCheck device if appropriate, and if that's appropriate for older patients. Check that they've got a personalised action plan in place, and then you're going to demonstrate inhaler technique. They're going to demonstrate their technique. You're going to compare and obviously suggest any changes if their technique's not quite right. And then you can make recommendations to the patient's GP if appropriate. Then once you've given them some advice and they know what it is that they're expected to do with their inhalers, you send them away, and then you need to try and get them back for a follow-up consultation within 12 weeks of that initial consultation. We know this is a little bit tricky sometimes with patients trying to get them back in for services, but it's really important for us to be able to demonstrate the benefit of this service to do that follow-up consultation. Because at the follow-up, you're going to check their inhaler technique, make sure that what you said in the first consultation has stuck with them, but you're also then going to recheck their ACT, their asthma control test, and hopefully you'll see an improvement in the score of the asthma control test because they're now using their inhalers properly. So you're then going to reaffirm the correct technique with the patient. In terms of activity fees, you get £10 for the initial consultation and £7 for the follow-up consultation. You don't need to do a follow-up if it's not clinically necessary, but that's down to your judgment as to whether you feel a follow-up consultation is clinically necessary. And I would suggest with the cohort of patients that we are reviewing here, it probably is more likely to be necessary just to make sure that any advice you've given sticks with the patient. There is also an additional incentive for you. So if that patient demonstrates a positive change in their ACT score, so that score increases at follow-up, then you get an extra £5. So more incentive for you to try and get them in for that follow-up consultation if possible. And as I said, for us being able to demonstrate the positive outcomes of this service for patients is really valuable. So please do try to get patients in for those follow-up consultations as appropriate. Pharma Outcomes is going to generate all the invoices for payment. Myself and Matt will get that sorted out between us, and the payments then will be made by BACS by CHL. So you do need to make sure that you complete the banking mandate, which will be sent out along with the contract for this service, so that we know where you want paying for the activity that you deliver in this service. In terms of training, slightly different for pharmacists and pharmacy technicians. If you're a pharmacist, then you need to go onto the CPPE website and complete the declaration of competence for the Improving Inhaler Technique service. There is lots of learning that's associated with that. It is suggested learning, as with all the other declaration of competences on the CPPE website. It's for you as a pharmacist, a registered professional, to declare your competence. I would highly recommend the CPPE e-learning module on inhaler technique. I think it's maybe a couple of hours at the most. But really, I found that very beneficial when I reviewed that e-learning. So if you haven't done that recently, it's definitely worth looking at it. And then you need to have attended this session or watch a recording of this session when it's available. So the LPC will make sure that a recorded session is available. So if you've got any colleagues who weren't able to attend this evening, then they will be able to watch the video back in their own time. For pharmacy technicians, it's very similar. You're going to complete the declaration of competence again on the CPPE website. Same as for pharmacists, making sure that you've completed any learning that's appropriate. also to attend this webinar or watch a recording. But we also just recommend that you have a conversation with the pharmacist or the regular pharmacist in your pharmacy, if appropriate, just to have a chat and confirm that you're competent and confident in delivering this service. So if you are a pharmacy technician delivering, just have that chat and make sure that you're comfortable with delivering the service. So in terms of how the whole team can support, I did mention this earlier, although the actual consultation with the patient itself does need to be completed by the pharmacist or the technician, it's really important to get your pharmacy team involved. Services often fall down when they're just left to the responsibility of one person within the pharmacy. So get your team on board. They can recruit all your patients for you. You can use stickers on bags, prompts on your PMR. You can even get them to complete the ACT score for you. So you can get paper copies, you can print them off the ACT website, and they can be filling in that ACT score whilst they're waiting to have that consultation with you. You can also have them sorting out all your appointments for you, so they can make the follow-up appointment for you. They can perhaps ring the patient a day before they're due to come in for their follow-up appointment to remind them, or if you have email or text messaging facilities, then that would be really helpful again. So do involve your pharmacy team in supporting this service. With regards to the pharmacist and the tech, then what they're going to do in that consultation is review the ACT score, use the in-check if it's appropriate, assess the inhaler technique of that patient for each device and give them advice or demonstrate the correct technique as appropriate. You may need to make some recommendations to the GP, which you can do through Pharm Outcomes. You're also going to give health promotion advice and signposting if it's appropriate. And then if they do need that follow-up, then obviously go through the whole process again, making sure your team are supporting with that chasing up of that patient. So we've talked quite a bit about the asthma control test. Hopefully everybody's aware of this as a measure of asthma control. So there's a number of questions that you ask the patient or the patient's carer to answer, and if you score 25, then your asthma appears to have been under control for the past 4 weeks. If you're scoring over 20, then you're on target, so your asthma is reasonably well controlled. But if you score less than 20, then you are off target and your asthma may not have been well controlled in the past 4 weeks. So the questions are particularly around what's happened with your asthma in the last 4 weeks. How much of the time has it kept you from getting as much done at school as you could have done? How often have your symptoms woken you up in the night or earlier in the morning than usual? How often have you had shortness of breath? Oops, sorry. And how often have you used your blue inhaler? And how would you rate your asthma control during the last 4 weeks? So simple 5 questions and they rate it and then it gives an overall score at the end. So if you're not familiar with the asthma control test, it's worth going online and having a look at that and really familiarising yourself with it. Next question we have. So national asthma prevalence, and it does say question 2, it's clearly not question 2, apologies. National asthma prevalence is 2% in under 18s in the country. What do you think the prevalence is in Cheshire and Merseyside? So is it lower than that 2% at 1.6, or is it higher, 2.6, 3.6, 4.6 or 5.6%? What's the scores on the doors, Matt?
Oh, we've got 21 here now. I think 2 people are definitely asleep because 2 people haven't done any of them. So I'm going to end the call there and share the results. So we've got most think 2.6, and then even Stevens with 3.6 and 4.6, and then 3 people thought 5.6.
Fantastic. Well, the answer is 3.6. So well done. 8 out of 21 people. You got that one right. So it is slightly higher in Cheshire and Merseyside than the national average, hence the reason why we are focusing on this particular cohort of patients for this pilot service. So just moving into roles and responsibilities for the service. The pharmacy team or the contractor must ensure that there's sufficient accredited pharmacists and technicians and trained pharmacy staff available to provide the service before enrolling a patient. So obviously don't offer the service if you haven't got trained people on site. But as this is a pilot and we're trying to get as much data and we're trying to get as many patients through the service as we can so that we can demonstrate the value that community pharmacy can deliver, it's really important that if your pharmacy signed up to deliver this service, that you do have trained staff available to deliver the service as much as possible throughout the pharmacy's opening hours. If you can't provide the service, then you should be directing the patient to the nearest pharmacy that is available to provide the service. So anticipating, Matt, that we may be able to provide a list of pharmacies on the LPC website who are participating, is that something we could support with?
Yes, we could do for the four different areas of Cheshire and Merseyside that are participating, yes.
Thank you very much. You must inform the Commissioner if you're unable to provide the service for an extended period of time, so that's defined as 4 weeks or more due to any circumstance. So do please let us know, either the LPC or CHL or beyond, just let one of us know and we can get that message through to the right people. And pharmacy teams themselves are responsible for sourcing the appropriate equipment to deliver the service. So that's the InCheck device and the placebo inhalers. So please do check the LPC website for the information on how you can get hold of those placebo devices. It's really important that you have them in stock. We've got another question now. I think this might be the last one, actually. This is a good one. Let's see how you do with this one. What percentage of drug reaches the lungs with a good inhaler technique for MDIs? Your options are 10 to 20%, 20 to 40%, 30 to 50%, 60 to 80%, or 70 to 90%. What do you think, guys? What percentage of drug reaches the lungs with a good inhaler technique for MDIs?
I'm not too sure about this one. Oh, hang on, I'm getting some more. I don't want to get the game away for the 5 people who haven't yet responded, but I think you're going to be quite shocked. I think you're being very generous with your answers.
It does quite often get people, this one.
Right, I'm going to end it there and share the results. So pretty much even all around. 3 people thought 10 to 20, 4 thought 20 to 40, 6 thought 30, I can't even speak. 6 thought 30 to 50. That's quite a tongue twister, really. 4 thought 60 to 80, and 3 thought 70 to 90.
So we have 4 people who are right, but unfortunately it's the 4 who picked 20 to 40%. So really shocking statistic from my perspective, really. You wouldn't get that from any other type of drug that a patient uses, would you? That only 20 to 40% of that drug is actually made available to be used. But even with good technique, that's the best you get from MDIs, unfortunately. I think that stat is related to an MDI not used through a spacer. So I'll just add the caveat to that. I would imagine the drug deposition with a spacer is probably much higher than that because of the way that the inhaler is administered. But standard MDI usage is 20 to 40%. So really quite disappointing. Again, another stat that reinforces the fact that inhaler technique is so important for appropriate asthma control. I'm going to hand over to Mark now. Mark? Don't know who Mark is. I'm going to hand over to Matt, and Matt's going to talk you through pharma outcomes for the service.
Thank you, Alison. I'm just going to try and share my screen. If I can. Can you all see that?
Be annoying and just like add a couple of things that have come that are probably more appropriate. Let's say it now, just following what Alison's done.
Yeah.
Before you do it, it will literally take me a couple of minutes. So I think all of that is really, really illuminating, especially that bit around good inhaler technique and how little of the drug gets to us. I would love to know the stats with a spacer, because we bang on constantly that you cannot give children inhalers without spacers. So I'd like to know that that's better. But what I did want to say was, although the asthma control test is really important, what you will be seeing is a whole load of children who are not diagnosed as asthmatic. You'll see more viral wheezers, if you like, but they are children who rely on their inhalers to help them through difficult periods. So their inhaler technique is just as important if you're asthmatics. So don't not enroll them just because they're not asthmatic, is what I'm trying to say. So there will be a really big group that won't be asthmatic, but they will use inhalers, and they will need to know how to use the inhalers properly. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Chaps, this will take me about 2 minutes because you all know what Pharma Outcomes looks like. And the template is nearly ready to go. You will find it on the left-hand side of your services screen once you've all sent back contracts to CHL, and CHL then inform me that you've done so. I anticipate, well, I work for the LPC on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I anticipate every Tuesday and Thursday just accrediting the next lot of pharmacies that Alison tells me have sent back contracts. Okay, so it'll be a bit piecemeal, bit by bit, and as you all send back your contracts. Okay, so it's not there yet until you've all signed up for sure with CHL. At the top, we've got the usual consent to data sharing with the GP. You can't do much else unless you tick consent to share. This next bit of patient details will be different when it comes to go live, because we will be using the patient demographic service as opposed to having to type out all the information there. Okay, from Outcomes is going through and making the switch there for me at the minute. It will ask for the name of, I changed it in the other one. Name of pharmacist. Of course, you can be a technician, so let's not be hierarchical about this. So I did change it in the other one to, I think, to name of professional with a GPHC number, and it's the professional pharmacist or pharmacy technician, and it's today's consultation face-to-face or remote. So just fill in those bits and pieces in there. And then the question saying, has the GP nurse reviewed within the last 12 months? Yes or no, simple as that. Nothing happens if you tick either one. It'll ask what the ACT score is. Now, if you're thinking, oh, but I haven't got the ACT in front of me, never fear. Click on that little calculator there, and up will pop the questions. So you can ask the patient or carer the questions, and then select the answers, such as all of the time, most of the time, some of the time, etc., etc. Okay, and then that will give you a score. And I think this one's going to be pretty poor score. So give me a score of 10. Okay, and then underneath here we've got another reminder about what the different results mean. Okay, just so you've got that little aid memoir there for you. Okay, that goes on to the different inhalers that are prescribed. So inhaler 1, it's not the different drugs, it's the actual devices. So if the patients are having a Clenil and a Salamol, for example, then you just click NDI because they're both MDIs. Okay. Whereas, of course, if they had a Ventolin or a Salamol for their reliever, but then they have, let's go for an Accuhaler for argument's sake for their preventer, then there will be 2 lots of questions and 2 lots of technique to check. Okay, so you'd go through and ask them to show you how they'd use the inhaler, or talk through how they use the inhaler if the spacer isn't there, for example. And you would tick yes or no if you feel that the initial observed technique is good or not. Whether the device is appropriate. Now that's only really going to be needed if the device is not an MDI, because if they are an MDI, then they should hopefully be using a spacer. And of course, you'll have gone through with PQS this year and ensured that all of these patients have got a spacer, because they're all your patients anyway. And just a little memo there for Liverpool pharmacies, don't forget, if they haven't got a spacer, you can provide them one under the spacer provision service that we have within Liverpool. That's no help to any of you who are in Liverpool, but for those of you who are, don't forget the spacer provision service. If they haven't got a spacer, get them one on that service. Okay. There's no links to this, to the inhaler provision service on this, because most of the pharmacies aren't in Liverpool, and I don't want to confuse all the people in St Helens and Knowsley and Cheshire, whichever and everywhere else. Okay. You then tick if there are any issues identified with the spacer. There's always the other box there. If you're taking other, please make sure that there's not one of those 4 that you're actually saying, because you'd be amazed how many pharmacists tick other and type exactly what's already above here. Okay, so just if it's one of these, tick one of those. It really helps with data capture and stuff. We're trying to analyze the data from this. Another little bit here about what actions were taken. And then when you've gone through all that, so you've seen that the technique perhaps isn't as good, you've showed them and explained to the patient or carer how to use the inhaler with the spacer or as a DPI, etc., and then ask them to show it to you again. So at least you can then confirm that they know what they're doing. So hopefully, if you've explained to them well, then if their initial observed technique was poor, then their final observed technique should be good. Okay. And again, if there was more than one device chosen, then you've got the same again. So the last little bit is if a follow-up's clinically appropriate or not. And now just to reiterate what Alison's already said, and it does tell you here on this little bit over on the right-hand side. So if the patient has been given advice on how to use an inhaler, so tweaking, making sure that spacer, if they're using the mask and the Vomatic, is at that 45-degree angle, to make sure that they're breathing nice and slowly for an MDI, etc., or have enough inspiratory drive to drive dry powder inhaler. So any kind of clinically significant advice that you've given to help to use their device better, then book a follow-up appointment. Okay, and that should be checked 8 to 12 weeks afterwards. And as detailed before, it's up to you how you would manage that within the pharmacy, whether you put in a diary and with their phone number or email address, again, to try and call them to get back in, or make the appointment face-to-face there and then. It's entirely up to you. If there's an action by GP required, you tick yes, and that will then send the notification through there. You need to kind of write in the consultation notes, though, what it is that the GP needs to know about. Otherwise, I'll just be getting a blank form. Okay. So if there's any action by the GP required, for example, they need a different device, or they need a different spacer, or they need a spacer if you're not in Liverpool, then chuck it in the consultation notes and press yes, and that notification will go through to the GP. Okay. A notification will go through to GP anyway, even if the technique's good, just to inform the GP that it's happened. Now the follow-up is almost identical. Let's go back into my screen. Looks a bit different as commissioner side rather than a provider. Again, same consent to share. You put the name of the patient in and it will find the patient, so you don't enter all the details. And again, it finds the patient from the first consultation. So of course, if you misclick on this one rather than the initial consultation and try and type in new patient details in, it won't recognize it. It'll invite you to go back to the initial consultation. I did see change to name of professional, so I'll make sure I go and change the first one to name of professional. GVHC number, etc. That's all exactly the same. And have there been any changes since the last consultation? Or sorry, yes or no. If there were any GP recommendations, have they been actioned? And then down here again, provide the ACT score by clicking all the answers on here. And if that is better than last time, you'll get the additional £5 payment. And again, clicking on the type of device, and then the same questions are asked again. Okay, and the same follow-up at the bottom. So it's identical, apart from the patient detail stuff at the top of the page. So I will stop sharing that. Any questions on that bit at all? I'd say it's pretty straightforward compared to some of the far-fangled pharma outcomes templates we have across CNM. So should be pretty straightforward for you. Anyone got any questions? Yes. Daniel Byets, I've unmuted you, so hopefully you can speak.
Hello, yeah, I did just type in the question. It was just looking at the farm outcomes form there. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, definitely.
It had a tick box where you could put in person or remote. So I'm presuming if someone's coming in initially, you're going to want to do that face-to-face so you can actually check their technique and go through the score. But can you do a follow-up one where you're actually doing the test to see if they've improved remotely, or would that need to be, how does it work with the remote one?
Alison, do you want to answer that question? Because you've got a lot of experience delivering this in Manchester.
Yes, I will do. So I think it would be slightly different if we were looking at an adult population with this service, but because the service is specifically for children, and having discussed with Kim and colleagues within Cheshire and Mersey, we do feel that these consultations should really be done face to face. I think it would be very difficult to deliver a consultation remotely, even for the follow-up, because you can't assess somebody's inhaler technique properly without actually seeing what they're doing. If you're using some sort of a platform like Zoom or Teams or something, you can physically see people, that may be acceptable. But I think the preference is that it is delivered face to face. So I don't know whether it's worth removing that option from farm outcomes, maybe, Matt, just to make it a little bit clearer, so that everybody understands.
I'll do that.
Kim, I don't know if you've got any comments on that as well.
Yeah, you covered it perfectly, Alison, because we had that conversation, hadn't we? So I think, you know, to make this valuable, I think it is face-to-face that we're talking about. I'm
making myself a note as we speak. When you're going through amending from outcomes templates, you don't spot things until you just present and go, oh yeah, I never changed that. So I just kicked myself slightly underneath the desk here. So that's one of the things I have missed, but I will get that changed before it goes live in anyone's pharmacies.
And I suppose my one other comment, because I did put my hand up, Matt, is there anyone else that has a question before I launch into what I was going to say? No. Okay.
With a hand up, please put your hand up if you do want to ask a question. I will shout you out in a minute.
So the fact that we've got the ACT in there as something that they have to complete, if you don't have an asthma diagnosis, you can still answer those questions as to, you know, does it wake you up at night, all this sort of stuff. Or is there, can you override that, Matt, or can you not? So if it was a preschool user with no diagnosis of asthma, you can still use an ACT as a sort of measure of control or how they're doing. Is that right?
Yes, because that's what the specification determines we have to do. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So you do complete that, but it's clear to everyone that they can complete that even if there isn't an absolute diagnosis of asthma. That's fine.
Yeah, the Pharmacom template has removed all kind of diagnoses anyway, and it's probably worth mentioning that a lot of under fives aren't properly diagnosed with asthma anyway, are they?
No.
People are diagnosed when they're not, and people aren't diagnosed when they are, etc., etc. So it's very difficult to their older children. It'd be okay in older children, definitely have a diagnosis. Absolutely. But for like the under fives, where it's lots of viral wheezes, as you mentioned, and that, you know, no one ever knows for sure if they're asthmatic or not until they're much older.
But all the things you're talking about will be relevant, meaning it might wake them up, might make them take days off school, it might disturb their sleep. But yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Might just be worth checking that the question is not mandatory to answer in farm outcomes, so that it can be skipped if it's not appropriate. There was another question in the Q&A.
Yes, we've got some Q&As here now.
Matt, yeah. So does the ACT score from the first consultation appear on the follow-up farm outcomes form to allow us to compare?
It doesn't, Andy, no, but you will be able to look at the provision history on the top left-hand corner of the screen. So I don't know if you're used to using any farm outcome templates where there's like a provision history, like smoking cessation is quite a common one, and some kind of minor ailments services are as well. So if you're on that services screen, you have that registered patients details in on the follow-up. If you look at the top left-hand side, it will kind of have a little grey, I think, box saying provision history. You can click on that, and that will bring up the answered questions of the previous template, and that will let you know what it is. But it doesn't come up without you clicking on that. And yes, a GP can refer to the service. So there's no kind of official mechanism for GPs to refer. There's no kind of buttons and farm outcomes refer mechanisms like there are for kind of hypertension and CPCS, etc. But local GPs can, you know, signpost patients to you guys for that service.
Well, thanks, Matt. I'll try and share my screen again, and then we can carry on. We're into the final hurdle now, so we shouldn't be keeping you too much longer. Is my screen sharing okay?
It is, yeah.
It's perfect, thank you. So we've just put a couple of links in there in terms of some resources to help you. Wessex AHSN have done some inhaler technique videos, which are quite useful. It's also useful to refer to NICE guidance with regards to inhalers. And there is also a patient decision aid on NICE in inhalers for asthma. And the British Thoracic Society website is on there as well, which has some good resources, as well as patient.co.uk, and lots of charities listed there as well, who all have information on their websites around inhalers. So I think some of those resources are also listed in the service specification. So do make sure you access some of those resources to help you in delivery of the service. Another question for you, this is a good one. How many inhalers do you think there are available on the market in England? So this is different types of devices and brands. How many inhalers do you think there are? 43, 68, 85, 97 or 123? What do you reckon, guys? How are we doing, Matt? We got some answers?
We'll end it there.
Okay, so bit of a mixture again. Just one person thinking 43. Everybody else is plumping between all those different numbers. I can tell you the answer is 123, believe it or not, different types of inhaler devices. Absolutely ridiculous. I think in the last few years, there's been quite a lot of new types of devices coming out. So in theory, guys, you should all be an expert on the inhaler technique for 123 different devices. Clearly, that's not really going to be very practical, is it? Because we're all very busy people. But as you're aware, there's two main types of devices. So there's your aerosol devices, which are your metered dose inhalers, breath activated metered dose inhalers, and your soft mist inhalers. And then you've got dry powder inhalers, and there's lots of different types of those. As you can see on the slide, Accuhaler, Ellipta, Spiramax, Genuair, Breezehaler. Some of the DPIs are more COPD type inhalers, so less appropriate for the type of patients that you're going to be seeing. But I think the key message here is that there are lots of different types of devices. So please do make sure that you order your placebos and you feel really confident in how to demonstrate appropriate inhaler technique with all the different types of devices. As we've said before, MDI and DPI are different. Your MDI uses hydrofluorocarbons as a propellant and has a higher carbon footprint. But if somebody is using their inhaler appropriately, then their SABA usage will reduce, which again reduces their carbon footprint. The dry powder inhalers do not use any propellants, but they are breath actuated, so they need that higher respiratory flow rate to activate the dose, but they do have much lower carbon footprint than MDIs. So we had a little bit of a look at the data for you in terms of the devices that are most frequently prescribed in Cheshire and Mersey. MDI obviously was top of the shop, as I think it is in a lot of places, but there's also a lot of breath actuated MDIs, turbohalers, Accuhalers and Easyhalers. So these are the devices that you really need to make sure that you're all comfortable in demonstrating technique for, because these are the ones that are most likely for you to see with the patients that you're recruiting into this service. So these are your most frequently prescribed SABA inhalers, and then we've got a couple of other ones that are frequently prescribed for high dose inhaled corticosteroids. Less likely, obviously, for you, your audience with children in this respect. But please do make sure that you know how to use and demonstrate how to use breath actuated MDI, turbohaler, Accuhaler and Easyhaler. They're your core ones. Just some little pie charts there to show you the proportion. Your SABA usage for MDI is quite high. You've got 87% in Cheshire and Mersey who are using MDIs, and then you can see for inhaled corticosteroids it is a lower proportion of MDI. So in terms of how to deliver this service, we've just got a couple of slides now in how to make the most out of the service, some top tips and some barriers and challenges for you. So in terms of prep for the service, you need to make sure your pharmacists and technicians, as well as your team, are trained, they fully understand the service, who the eligible patients are and how they can recruit patients into the service, and that they've read the service specification as appropriate. Make sure you've got all the equipment that you need to deliver the service, and also that you've signed and returned the contract. you're set up on farm outcomes, and you've shared your payment information with CHL. So as Matt explained, CHL will send out your contract and your banking mandate. Once those signed documents are returned to CHL, we'll then notify Matt at the LPC and he will activate you in farm outcomes. Then once you're activated in farm outcomes, you can start delivering the service. So do remember to involve the whole pharmacy team in recruiting patients. It might be worth setting some targets, putting a tracker up on the wall, whatever it is that will work in your pharmacy to try and recruit patients into the service. And do make sure that you've talked to your local GP practices and other healthcare professionals in the area to make sure that they're aware that you're participating in the service and that they can refer patients to you. Again, in terms of claiming, Farm Outcomes does all that for you. It generates a monthly claim, and as long as you've supplied your banking information to CHL, then you'll get paid buybacks on a monthly basis. Remember that if your patient does attend for that follow-up consultation, then you will get that £5 additional incentive if there's been a positive change in ACT score between initial and follow-up. So in terms of some top tips for successful service delivery, we've put together a couple of slides for you based on the learnings of delivery of this service over in Greater Manchester. So one of the biggest barriers that has arisen in GM is that patients just say they're not interested. They're too busy, they don't have enough time, they feel they don't need any help. Actually, they're doing okay. They've been taking their inhalers for years. There aren't any problems. You don't need to tell me how to use my inhalers. I'm absolutely fine. So really what you need to do in this case is really emphasise the point that if somebody's got well-controlled asthma, it should not have an adverse impact on patients' lives. So maybe just give them the ACT test if this is what they're saying to you, and see what kind of a score they get. Because a lot of people accept that their asthma will impact on their life, and it doesn't have to if they're using their inhalers properly. Poor inhaler technique is the biggest reason for patients to have poor asthma control. So try to sell the benefits of the service, better symptom control, less reliance on their inhalers, a better quality of life. Go beyond the GP, so explain how the service that you're offering supports and complements the work that the GP and the practice nurse are doing with that patient. And think about the terminology that you use. Patients might be a bit more receptive to the offer of a chat about their inhalers, but they might be put off more if you're using words like service or review. So just think about how you're talking to patients about it. And use some prompts, so consider using patient queries or even a planned GP review as a trigger to offer the service if you have access to that information. Second challenge, I'm too busy to stand at the counter looking for patients. I've got too many scripts to check. I've got too many CPCS referrals to deal with. I said a couple of times throughout this evening's session, this is not just about the pharmacist or the technician delivering consultations with the patient. You must involve your whole team in supporting the delivery of this service. Make the most of your PMR system. You know, lots of systems allow you to flag patients who might be eligible for the service. Use stickers on bags, put the bags in a different place, whatever it is you need to do to flag that these patients would be suitable for the service. And organise some training, make sure your staff are fully briefed, they understand which patients are eligible and why it's so important actually for patients to receive this service. And it may be worth setting some targets and keeping track of your progress. So a bit of a tracker on the wall, maybe in the dispensary, of how many reviews have been completed each week. Just serves as a bit of an incentive for the whole team. Another challenge, how can I balance unpredictable workloads with delivering these consultations? I think community pharmacy is getting a little bit better at this. We're probably delivering more services now that involve consultations, and we're getting better at arranging our time. But it is always a balance between walk-in prescriptions, EPS, you know, balancing your workload. So try and plan your day as much as possible. If there's a time within the day that's better for you to deliver this service, then make sure that all the team are aware of that. So if you have a little bit of a quieter spell in the afternoon between 2 and 4, then maybe that's the time that you want your team to be targeting patients. So plan some time aside to deliver this service if you can. Working time slots, so if you are calling a patient, then you can give them a slot rather than a specific time, and just be flexible. Make sure there's always someone trained and able to provide the service in the pharmacy. Another one, my patients forget appointments and don't answer the phone. So remind them, give them an appointment card. You can actually print something out from Farm Outcomes, I think, as a reminder of when their appointment is. Embrace technology. If your patients have requested a call at a certain time or booked a follow-up appointment, remind them about it beforehand. If you can send an email or a text message, that's really helpful. And make sure you've got the right contact details, excuse me, for the patient, so you've got the best way of getting in touch with them. Another challenge we have is that actually my local GPs are just not that interested. So it's really worth trying to engage your local practices with the service, explain how you can help them by supporting their patients. Supporting their patients help them with their targets. It helps to improve their asthma and potentially reduce SABA prescribing. So it does have a direct benefit to the practice as well as to the patients. Engage the whole GP team, so talk to the receptionists and the care navigators, the people who do the repeat prescriptions, and work together, work with pharmacies that are engaging with the same GP through your PCN if appropriate. Value the GP's time, try and find a way that works for them in terms of talking to them about this service. And don't undersell yourself. You know, as pharmacists, we're the experts in medicines. We probably know far more about inhaler technique than the GP does. So really sell yourself and make sure that they know that you're an expert in this, and inform them of the benefits of the service. Be concise, give appropriate feedback, and if you do have to make recommendations to GPs, as Matt said, make sure you've got some clear and concise notes in the notes box in Farm Outcomes. And do keep up the momentum. So if you don't get any referrals from practice, or if the numbers kind of drop, then do go and talk to them again and make sure that they're aware that you're delivering this service, because working in conjunction with the GP will be really helpful. Coming towards the end now, so we've just got some contacts on here for you. So if you do have any queries with the service specification, then you can contact Romy at the address that's on the screen. Delivery of the service and Farm Outcomes will probably be your LPC. So Matt, if you're Liverpool, CPCW if you're Cheshire West, and Halton St Helens and Knowsley for the other localities. If you've got any issues with payments or contracts, then you can come through to CHL, which is the organisation that I work for. My colleague Helen can be contacted at the email address on the screen. So we've just got the answers to the questions, the quiz questions. We had those as we were going through. So now I'll stop sharing and we'll take any questions that anybody has.
We've got one on the Q&A. Again, please feel free to put your hand up if you'd like to ask any questions, or feel free to type in the Q&A. We can answer them now. This is your last chance, chaps. So the question is this a way for pharmacies to take over asthma reviews that should be done at the GPs? The very quick and easy answer to that is no. And I can say this from experience as a former practice pharmacist and independent prescriber who did asthma as his competency area when he did the prescribing. So I have witnessed far more asthma reviews than I care to think about from far more different types of clinician, whether it's pharmacists, nurses, or GPs. An asthma review is far more in-depth than a simple asthma or inhaler technique check. And actually, if you look at the notes, a lot of the time, the inhaler technique bit is the bit that they don't do in a practice, and actually haven't been doing for a number of years now, because lots of things have been remote. And it's been very difficult to try and check technique due to COVID, because people are breathing heavily in and out of machines and inject devices and inhalers and placebos and all things like that. So it hasn't really been looked at. So a lot of the children that we will be seeing may not, at least for a good few years now, if they're older, have had technique checked in the practice. Okay, I won't bore you with what you do as in an technique, well, in an asthma review in a practice, but it's an awful lot more than just an inhaler technique. So this is something that may help the practice highlight a patient who does need an asthma review if they're overdue, but it's not going to replace what they do. Kim, have you got a question?
It's not a question, Matt, but it's just one to give some assurance from the Beyond perspective that we will be advertising your service to the local GPs. So hopefully they will already know. So when you actually make contact with them, they'll know something about it. Also, I think it probably is worth saying that hopefully it will link to some of the things that you're already doing from your pharmacies, such as smoking cessation, and safe disposal of inhalers. So if you're talking to somebody who is on inhalers, it is a question around smoking and the parents smoking. So I think that will link for you. And then I just really wanted to say that we are really grateful that you want to be involved in this, because actually you're helping to deliver the asthma care bundle, which is a national directive. And one part of that, a big part of that, is inhaler technique. And, you know, it is critical to us being able to deliver this. So we're really, really pleased that we've had the response across Cheshire and Merseyside. And I really like your little poster that you had on there, Alison, which is the poster that says asthma can kill. And I think that is just to remind people that this is really important, and people probably don't take asthma as seriously as they should do. So this is us all joined together to try and get that across. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, I agree. Really important. I think people do downplay asthma, don't they? And that's why some of the stats that we've shared this evening, I think, are really important. Absolutely. Does anybody have any final questions for us?
Nothing is coming up. No hands are up and no one else started the Q&A. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds to either raise your hand or type frantically into the Q&A before we bring this session to a close. Bit of a countdown clock happening here now.
I'm just going to share screen while we've got the last chance for any questions, just to leave you with some next steps. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Apologies for the technical issues at the beginning of the night, but we got there in the end and we've had good attendance. So thanks very much for joining us, for participating. And thanks to Kim and Kate and Matt for their presentations. So best of luck to everybody who's starting to deliver this service. A summary of your next steps on the screen now, and you know where we are if you need to ask any questions. Anything come through, Matt?
Nope, so that's us. Good evening, everyone. I'll stop recording.
Thanks everyone. That was really good.
Thank you very much. Good luck.